So it looks like the bulk of the people, or at least a good size of them, are here for Senate Bill 74. So why don't we start with that one? It happens to be first on our list anyway. So let's see what finds the bill here. I don't see Senator Pearl. No. How about Representative McGuire? You want to introduce the bill? Hi.
Good morning. I'm Representative Carol McGuire, Merrimack 27, the towns of Allenstown, Dunbarton, Epsom, and Hooksett. House Bill 74 passed the House, and that's about all I know about it. No questions.
You didn't have a public hearing?
I presume it did. It wasn't in my committee.
It says it was. Oh, no, that could have been the Senate ED&A.
It was the Senate ED&A committee. And I believe it went to Resources, Recreation, and Development. And
Oh, I see. Senate Bill 74? Can you look it up?
Says House ED&A.
Would you repeat the title so I can know what I'm talking about?
This is the one about the reports.
Oh, that one. Yes, that did go to my.
Okay.
Pardon my lack of brilliance. It's early yet. House Bill 74 requires agencies that issue permits involving real property, which, as far as we can tell, is primarily DES for land alteration of terrain, wetland crossings, and such like, and DOT for driveway permits, to track and report how many they issue and how long it takes. We think this is something that those agencies should be tracking already, since it's a significant issue. For DOT, we have all heard horrendous stories of 3 years to get a driveway permit, and that applies to all state roads, state maintained roads, and there's a whole lot of them. I had to get a state driveway permit too when we built our house. Fortunately, it didn't take 3 years. But in DES, they issue, I think they said 700 types of permits involving property, various wetland, bridge crossing, alteration of terrain, wetlands, for shoreland, the whole bit. And if they're not keeping track of how long it takes to issue such a permit, both in man hours and in calendar days, how do they know the fees they're charging are correct? They can't. Some of them are in statute, of course, in which case we have to know how long, what it costs, but either way, we need the data. There are statutory requirements for how quickly they have to issue the permits, but we don't know if those are extremely generous or totally tight because we don't have any data. And I think we need the data. The fiscal note that ED&A saw was based on the original bill. The Senate amended it, and I'm not quite sure how well the fiscal note fits. As I said, ED&A committee thought that the report might be new, but keeping track of those permits is something that DES and DOT ought to be doing anyway as part of their normal course of business. So we didn't believe the very large numbers in the fiscal note, and we hope that you will be able to get some better numbers. If it is too expensive, I would suggest that you simply, instead of saying any agency, say DES, because that's where the bulk of the effort is and that's where the issues are. We just get told DOT to make some amendments to their driveway process. We just did that last week. So if we let them know that we do want to keep track of these permits, then I think they can do it while they're accommodating the other changes. But we need to know what DES is doing. And like I said, we need to know if they're the limits we're giving them are reasonable, absurdly generous, or way too tight. We don't know. There's also the issue that right now, any of the schedules can be extended to any length with the permission of, or the agreement of the person asking for the permit. And the committee thought that any person that's asking DES for a permit that is vital to a project they're working on is going to agree to pretty much anything DES asks for in order to get the permit. They're not going to say, well, no, we're not going to let you take 3 months. The law says you have to do it in 2. And they'll say, okay, fine, denied. And I would be worried about that if I were in such a situation. So we need some data. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Was this a consent type thing in your committee, or was this?
Yes, we all agree. Well, no, it was not on consent because of the dollars, but it passed the House on a voice vote with no debate.
Okay. Other questions? No? Okay, good. Thank you very much. So an LBA question, if we pass this, is there a budget impact?
Yeah, they would have to absorb it because there's no appropriation in the bill.
Okay,
So no budget impact.
right, no
Right,
dollar.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
No
but the
appropriation.
internal, yes.
There
okay.
would be some effort if their systems, if they're not currently tracking these things, then there'd be some effort to set up a system that would do so.
Right,
I
Yeah.
can't see that there would be an ongoing effort, but there might be a set startup cost.
yeah. But you think that, I mean, this kind of thing would be useful just for management purposes, right? To find out, how are you performing from year to year or whatever?
Right. I mean, do you have 2 people issuing the same type of permit and one takes twice as long as the other? I mean, are they really the same type, or if you've got a star performer and a dud? I mean,
Yeah, okay,
that's why we think they should be tracking this already. And
sure. Okay, Representative Evil.
Thank you very much. I just wondered whether I see that Mr. Crapo is here, and I didn't know if we'd have a chance to ask
Oh, yeah, we're
DES
going to
about
talk
it.
to both DES and DOT.
Okay, great, because, we just went through this whole thing with fees and, budget cuts, and one of the concerns I always have is if you understaff and don't have enough people to do things, the reverse can happen, that things are approved and there's no meaningful analysis. So, thank you.
I will say that our committee was concerned, but since we don't know whether they're going flat out or coasting along and doing other stuff in their spare time, because we don't have any data.
Let's hear from DES.
Hey, good morning. My name's Adam Crapo. I'm the Assistant Commissioner at the Department of Environmental Services. We're agnostic to the bill. We're neutral on it. We don't have any issues with reporting requirements. I guess where our issues come in, or our concerns are, we have many disparate databases that house this data, right? And a lot of it comes down to, a lot of it's a manual process. Just recently, the capital budget within the last few years gave us an appropriation to get our land resources management permits. That's shoreland, wetland, subsurface, and alteration of terrain online. And their disposition is that they could do this very easily. That's something that they can do now. It's still a little manual, and we're working on getting these upgrades to be able to do it automatically. Expanding beyond LRM, you have solid waste permitting for landfills, you have air permitting, we have over 90 different permit types across the agency. And so I think where we fall on this is no one software upgrade is going to, because there's all different databases, is going to provide what we need here to be able to do this. It may in some circumstances, and where the intent is over time to get all of the agency onto the new platform that LRM is going onto, but the capacity that we have now is to get LRM on, and that's about it as far as staffing goes to be able to get those programs on. So if this were to pass, I think what we would request is 2 part-time positions to be able to do this, to be able to cull this data from all the databases, go into them, and generate the report. You know, I think full-time positions would probably be too much. They wouldn't have a whole lot to do, you know, once the report is finished. But if we could have some part-time positions to primarily in our 2 largest divisions, our waste management division and our water division, to be able to do this, that would be helpful in being able to cull the data from all of those separate databases, putting it together in a report that would be generated. The other comment that I would just make is that, you know, there's several pieces of the report that go into the individual permits. So if you go over the 90-day time frame, then you're reporting on individual permits and the time for, you know, when we sent letters to them and all of that, which is fine. But that, and the reason why that's an issue is because a lot of this would be staff going into the letters that we send to find those dates. You know, we don't currently track that information. And so it would be, that's why the 2 positions would be needed. And the other thing I would just point out is this, do you want all of this? Would be a voluminous report. Do you want all of this information for every permit type that we issue, or are there select permits that you would want to hone in on? And that may be a question for Senator Pearl and the sponsors, but that would make it a little bit more targeted so that we could focus those resources instead of focusing on every permit type that we issue. So I guess that's where we land on it. We're happy to do it, and would be more that, you know, we think it's appropriate to report our timeframes because, you know, in full transparency, it's just getting the resources to be able to do that for every permit type.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming in today. Have you had any discussions with our friends over in the Senate about, you know, potentially adding some additional money to your budget in the budget that they're crafting to address this?
So right now we have a time frame to get our land resources management permits online in the next 2 years. We have basically where it is now is we have online forms that they can submit. We're going to an online database and online upgrades to be able to do true e-permitting. So, you know, some of the GIS work that's needed for those various permit types within land resources management. We don't believe we have the staff to be able to manage getting much more than that on this new system within the next 2 years. So we haven't had that discussion with the Senate. And it would be a pretty large price tag. Right now, we're spending around $4.8 million, I believe it is, to get those programs on a new database and have online permitting for those specific programs.
Follow up? So that's good to know that, you know, that would be the price tag associated with that. But you had mentioned that you were looking for 2 additional part-time staff. Have you talked to them about getting that into the budget?
We have not, because this is not in the budget. So this is sort of a separate initiative. We could, if this were to pass, we could do that.
But this has passed. It's passed the Senate and the House.
Right.
So, I mean, we're the only ones that are, you know, stopping it.
Right. So we talked to Senate Finance when it was over there. And we talked to Senate ENR when it was over there and made our case for, you know, initially we thought we would need a few million to do these database upgrades. We pared that back to say that to be able to do this initially, we'll need to get a few additional staff to be able to put this into motion and continue doing this until they're on the new database. So we pared back the fiscal note quite a bit from the initial one that we submitted, working with Senator Pearl. So we haven't, we certainly could request that. I think this recently passed the House within the last week or two, correct? So we haven't really had an opportunity to go back to the Senate to talk to them in their committee. At this point, we've only presented our initial budget. It was our initial budget presentation, so.
Representative Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, I have two scenarios I'd like to offer. Person wants to get going in the building season, so they bring in an application in, let's say, March. And the application gets reviewed for a week or two, and it says it's incomplete. They write back to them, said you need this and this. They bring back it takes a month and a half to upgrade the permit. Takes another week or two or 4 or 5 to look at the next permit. And it's still incomplete.
Right.
So finally, the permit isn't granted till probably late in the construction season, and we'll hear all the complaints. So, two questions. Are they paying for each review? And when was the last time we raised the cost of these permit reviews?
So in HB2, this session, you did add appropriations for, or the governor's office added some, and this committee added some fee increases for permit types. So I think that answers that question. It doesn't cover all of our permits though, right? We have over 90 different permit types, and so some of them are increasing, some of them are not. I would say the scenario that you laid out is what we see most often is that somebody submits an application, it is incomplete because it doesn't have all of the information we need to actually do the review. We send them a request for more information. They will resubmit, but sometimes there is a significant length of time between when we send that letter back and when they resubmit the information. And I would say that's most often what we see, but we're not perfect. There are instances where we take a little longer than we should, but I would say that I would say it's a 90-10. About 90% of the time we don't get the correct information on the first go around, and then it takes a significant amount of time to get the information from the applicant. And that, when you hear about from your constituents these long permitting timelines, most often it's they submitted to us, but then maybe half or more than half of the time it was sitting with the applicant revising what they submitted. So that's what I would say about that scenario.
So what do we count as the date of submission? The first time they brought in the incomplete thing, or the first time it was completed application? That should be effectively the date of the application, not the months before when it was incomplete.
I believe under this bill, it is the date that it's submitted, and then it requests if it's been more than 90 days when we've sent requests for more information and in other information for individual permits that we're dealing with.
So
So you're getting into the individual permit level
Yeah,
once it's hit the 90
we
day.
need to reflect who caused the delay.
which I think this bill does. It's just we don't have the capability at this moment with the existing staff and the existing databases to be able to cull that information out, and which is why we're asking for the 2 part-time folks, because they would be able to do that. And the other thing I would say is, if we don't get that, what will end up happening is the permitting staff will be the ones doing this report, and so that will take them off of issuing permits. And so, that is something that I know is a focus of the legislature this year, and the executive branch is to streamline and expedite permitting as much as possible, obviously without, having an adverse impact to the environment. But I would say that this would cause us to take people off of permits to generate this report.
Representative Griffin.
As a general comment, the testimony we just heard, in my mind, cries for the need of visibility and the need for this bill. And there are 90 different types, I believe you said, of permits. And we've talked about the timetable, the delays, and who causes the delays. And I think that's what this bill is all about, is to give us that visibility so we can see what's going on, because right now, we're pretty much blind to the operations.
Let's have Representative Rung and then Representative Ebel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Crapo, for taking my question. We've talked a lot about delays and not enough information coming in the permit process. Has DES ever examined the actual permit application to see if there's some kind of confusion or something in that causes people to, omit information or omit faulty information?
Absolutely. So thank you for the question, Representative. We have, and one of the things that we're undergoing right now is totally rewriting our wetlands rules, because we've found that it's not a linear process. It's not something that someone can pick up and read, and they can go through it in a linear fashion. It's very circular, and it points to different references. You need a consultant to be able to pick that up and do what you need to do. And in my philosophy, and I know the commissioner's philosophy, has been to let's simplify this a bit and make it so it's easier for folks to understand what they need to submit. We are undergoing that with everything that we are putting on the new database. And so, but as I mentioned, most of the permits that are going on that database can do this. It's more of the niche types of permits, like groundwater discharge permits or landfill permits, which we have several different types. Yes, we have done that, and we continue to do that, but that is something that we will continue to do over the next few years, I guess, what I would say there.
Representative Ebel.
Thank you. I have a couple. Just a really easy one. When Representative McGuire, or Chair McGuire, was talking about this, she said she thought that there was an updated fiscal note. This must be the updated fiscal note that if you started out in the millions, this one talks about 200 to 500,000. So is this the most?
Yeah,
There's not another one.
that is not, yeah, there's not another one. That's where we landed initially. I believe we were between 2.5 and 5 million to get all of the agency on the new database. It's called Enviro. It's made by Windsor Solutions. Many other states have it. So that would get most of the other permitting programs on that database. When we went back and looked at it, we determined that it wasn't something that we could do in the next 2 years. So that's why we're asking for additional staff at this point to be able to comply with the requirement for February of 2026.
Okay. All right. So I think you answered the question I was going to ask you. I mean, I think, speaking for myself, I feel a little battered after just going through the budget process and trying to understand the hurdles that the agencies are facing to do the work that they're expected to do. We raised fees, when the governor had an initiative to streamline permitting. So I guess I have a concern that if more money isn't appropriated to do this, what will happen is exactly what you said. Your permitting staff is going to be the staff that has to prepare this report. So that's if you're not given additional staffing.
That's correct. So it would be the same staff that currently issue and review permits. They're the ones who would be tracking this information on each individual permit. And the reason why it would be those folks is because the report requires for any individual permit that goes over 90 days, you need to report specific information relative to that permit for that application. So that would require our permit staff, because they're the ones issuing the letters. They're the ones that are making the phone calls to the applicants.
So so it might end up slowing down the permitting process. So I just would say as a general matter, I think this is a great idea. I'm just really concerned that it's going to slow things down rather than speed them up. The other thing is that you're supposed to have your first report done in this by February 28th of 2026, and you're supposed to do this every year.
Right.
That
That
seems like a tight time frame to me.
The Senate did change the date. I believe it was February of 2025 initially. They changed it to February of 2026. Since we're not currently collecting this information, there would be a lag time between, if this bill passed as is, it would be a lag time between being able to collect that information and reporting it out. I don't know that we could meet that 2026 deadline because we don't it's talking about the prior calendar year, which is right now, and we don't currently collect all of the information. We collect some of it, but not all of the information. So it would be an incomplete report for 2026. But moving forward, if we got the staff, we would be able to, actually have a detailed report for the legislature.
Do you think there's value in an annual report?
As far as for management or for we are constantly reviewing our timelines. As many of you know, and Representative McGuire mentioned, we have many statutory timelines that we need to comply with. Most of them are not 90 days. It's for wetlands, it's 50 days. For landfills, it's another timeline. For air permitting, it's 120 days. So there are varying timelines that we comply with. And so that's the other reason why this would be a little bit different is that we would have to add an additional report for anything that does have a report out to say, give us a report for maybe 120 days, which is our statutory timeline, and the 90 days. We do currently track and work with all the programs to make sure management knows whether or not we're going over the statutory timelines. It's just, we don't track some of that information on the individual permit level that's being requested in this report. So I wanted to speak to Representative McGuire's point that we should be doing this. We're doing it to an extent already, and management knows we're not breaking the law by going over our statutory timelines. It's just we don't track it to the level of detail that is required in this report. Would it be beneficial? Absolutely, and that's why we're going to a more online systems and online and databases that can do this.
So would you agree that by not giving you additional staff to do this, there is a very big potential that permitting would slow down?
It would slow down some, primarily in our waste management division section. They have the least amount. They're already strapped on permitting timelines, and they are, they have some of the more primitive databases, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so that's the area where it would slow things down. For our water division, it may be a little bit, like I said, our land resources management section, which is what I think most people think of when they think of DES permitting, can already do this. So that would be okay. And our air resources division is able to do this as well. So really it would be our waste management division that would have some hurdles here to overcome.
So I apologize. I intended to welcome Representative Haakon Phillips to the Division 1, and I got busy on other things. So nice to have you here. So I thought I heard you say things that sound like a conflict. One is you want two part-time people to dig into the files and create the report, but on the other hand, you don't have some of the data, and it would be gathered on an ongoing basis, right? So wouldn't that make more sense that the people who send this letter or request more information or whatever, when they do so, they make a note in a database, and that becomes the report, right?
Right.
So rather than somehow going back in time and with a new part-time person who isn't involved in this, right?
Right. Like I said, initially we would need to cull the data and pull it all in. Our intention going forward, should this pass, is to have staff to do exactly what you're saying. But initially especially for or for calendar year 25, but probably calendar year 26 as well, to be able to meet the requirements of this report. We would need part-time staff. Going forward, our intent is to have the actual permit reviewers put this in a spreadsheet or in a database, or have database upgrades that would allow for this sort of thing to happen. As I mentioned, there are some databases that do this. It's just not for the 90 days. It's for maybe 60 days or something else, and that takes a lot of I shouldn't say a lot, but some DOIT resources to upgrade those. And so because it's so many disparate databases, that's the problem. It's not that, we can't do it. It's just we would need at least initially some part-time staff, and over time adapt to be able to do this.
Okay. So it might be useful to start the first report sometime in the future, right? So therefore, we're never going backwards. We're always,
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
you could do that as well.
yeah, okay. Representative Runk.
Quick question, Mr. Crapo. Are all letters that are going out as part of that permitting process captured on One Stop?
Some are, some are not. Most of these are manual, or a lot of them are manual. The ones that you're probably thinking of are the land resources management permits. Those are all captured on One Stop. I would say 75 to 80% are. There are some that are not, though, and I can get you some information on that if you'd like. Yeah.
All right, shall we move on to DOT? Yeah?
Perfect.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Hi,
Hi, Susan Clausen. I'm the Director of Operations at DOT.
welcome to Division 1.
Thank you. So DOT is neutral on this legislation, and where DOT is a little bit different after hearing the testimony from DES, DOT has implemented Salesforce, the statewide online permitting system, last August. And so we have very good data from August moving forward. We were in some old Access databases, 6 of them, that were tracking stuff. So now we have this information in Salesforce. You'll see in our fiscal note, there was a fiscal impact listed. That's because when we go down through each of these reporting requirements in here, all of this data is in the Salesforce system. So we can see when an application is submitted. We can see when we replied back in the system and asked for more information. We can see how long it took for them to give it to us and what was submitted. The challenge and the reason we were asking for some software improvements is that is all in the back end, and some of it is in text fields in the system. So we would need some system enhancements to just be able to capture that data to be able to create these reports. The other piece to this that I was hoping for a little bit of clarification is some of these are in individual permit application levels. So just looking at Salesforce this morning, there is this morning 109 open applications with the department that have been greater than 90 days. So I can easily see that on a dashboard that was created for me for some monthly performance metrics that we're able to start doing in the department. But I would then need to dive in and be like, of those 109, and get those specific details, which are in the system, but it would be either a manual effort to peel that out, or we would need some software improvements to be able to do that. That's where our fiscal note came from.
And the way I read this is when it becomes 90 days, that sort of triggers this one being included, right? But you just said there's 109 today that are 90 days, right? Well, tomorrow it's some different number,
Correct.
and the next day it's something like
Correct.
this, right?
Yeah, so if I were to look over the last year, we don't have a year's worth of data yet in the system.
Yeah.
But as it stands right now, staff has created me a dashboard that I can pull up and look at some overall statistics, or dive into any specific one. So they would create a dashboard that said, cumulative totaling applications that went over 90 days. But then some of these individual reporting requirements right now would have to go into each one. All right, when was this letter given? How many days was this? So sort of that, what this report might look like could be very large, depending on the situation. Our goal would not to have it be large, but a lot of times I was looking at some other statistics that we track is often it will go back to the applicant, and the applicant has to go to their engineer, get some more research, get some more deed history, develop other plans, and that can prolong the timeline, which is outside of our control. So, unfortunately, some of these do go over 90 days, and it's just that interaction back and forth.
Are we just talking driveway permits, or are there other kinds of permits?
So my understanding from reading this is I believe we would be talking about our driveway permits. We would be talking about what we call our right-of-way activity permits. They used to be called excavation permits when you put in a water line, sewer line. And I believe this would also include our utility pole permits. What I do not have that we have in our system that I believe we would not be reporting on is we have sponsor highway permits, we have, and some parade permits. I wouldn't think these would be captured, need to be reported on as far as this is written today. But we have that information.
Sign?
So those are being moved into our permit portal. Signal permits are being moved into their crosswalk, rapid flashing beacon. So my goal as the director is to move all of the permit applications and permit types that the division has into this portal, into this online system, because it can provide any of these metrics that we need. But I need a software developer for, I think I put in here 2 sprints, which is sort of 2 development periods for them to take that data in a presentable format and then teach my staff how to create different reports in the future.
What's the cost of that?
That was $175,000 per sprint is what this estimate is. So I think I had 2 sprints in here for 150. I also had the first time we go through this, some staff time. One advantage, one opportunity maybe we have is SB 153, which is the voluntary expedited review process for specific residential driveway permits. That legislation brings the department a new position, a liaison. I believe that liaison is going to be extremely busy, especially the first few years. We haven't collected fees before as an agency for this, and the expedited, voluntary expedited review process will be collecting fees. So this position is going to be very integrated into what that process looks like. My hope is, as this moves on over the next few years, that position might have some bandwidth where they could facilitate this report for SB 74. We don't know that right now, but that's my goal, is to get that streamlined enough where there are department permitting expert and can provide these reports and know how to use the software to create any mixed match of information that we want.
Thank you.
But it might be a few years.
Committee, any questions? Representative Munns?
I'm sorry if thank you for
Sure.
taking my question. I'm sorry if I may have missed this earlier, but if you do not get the additional $150,000 that you're talking about, how would you fulfill this? What would you need to do to fulfill this requirement during the current biennium? I mean, we heard from DES, they need additional part-time staff. What would your solution be?
So we would have to take the people who are currently issuing the permits, and these ones that would meet the criteria for extra information, I would have to peel them out those first few weeks in January to go into each of those individual reports and individual permits. And that number of individual permits is unknown to me at this moment in time. It could be anywhere from 100 to 2,000. I don't know. But that's what would happen those first, weeks. We have the data, so we wouldn't need to. I think you had suggested, well, they should start putting it in now. It is going into Salesforce now. It would be diving into each individual application and putting it in whatever format was acceptable for the committee. You're welcome. Anytime.
I didn't ask anyone else to come because these were the two that had, were part of the fiscal note and so on. So the question is, what do we want to do with this bill? Do we want to pass it with a delay, pass it as is, retain it, and talk about the details? It sounds like there's a lot of details involved here. Okay, Representative McGuire.
Thank you. I'd like to lobby to your passing it with a delay because it sounds like a lot of the cost will be in catching up on the current activities. If we make the first report due in February 27 for the activities in 26, then nearly everything is, if they start doing what they say they're doing, should be ready to go, and there would be very few, probably the most contentious and complicated ones that would still have been into into calendar year 25. So if we give them the rest of this year to get their act together and start figuring out what they need to do, then in 26 they can keep the data, and it would be a much simpler job to report in 27 on 26 than it would be to report in 26 on 25, considering that we'd be at least halfway through 25 before they even got started on collecting the data. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Representative Munns.
I think we need to do this. I'm surprised that it doesn't already exist. I think it needs to be done as much for just internal management purposes as it is for providing any information to the legislature. So I think it's something that should be done. And I think it was Representative Weiler that indicated that, we do need to better understand what the causes of the delay are. I mean, without that, we really won't be able to solve the problem going forward. My suspicion is that at least a significant part of the problem is the fact that we have persistently underfunded the agencies, so they don't have the personnel they need to do the active review of the actual review of the permits. And what I'm concerned about is if we do this now, we've heard that they're going to need additional staff. There isn't any money allocated to them in the budget to do this. We're already asking them to do a lot with a lot less in the budget that we've passed. I think, given those challenges, to me, it's unfortunate that this didn't come to light during the budget process and that it wasn't included in the budget request. But to me, given all of those challenges, I think the thing to do is to recommend that this bill not be passed, but that it be included in the next budget, and that we do it the right way, and in a way that's going to not impede the work that the agencies are doing at the present time. So I would recommend ITL.
Okay. Others, Representative Weiler.
I think we could ask for a report. What are your capabilities? How significant is this a problem? Give us a report within a year or so as to what it would take to get this done as described in this bill. And then when we get that, we can see if there's any money extra at that time to do any of this, and at least we'll know, is it a real problem? Are they keeping track? Are they doing? It sounds like they probably could with ongoing things they're doing already, but to have some follow-on, this isn't something that can happen right away, because there's hundreds of permits that have to be dealt with and need something more, but I'd say we need to put a report out. Thanks.
Representative Evil.
Following along with what Chair Weiler said, I mean, that sounds a little bit like a retain to me, because they could tell us what's going on, and we could consider the bill. I too am concerned about the budgetary hurdles. I think this is a valuable exercise. There's no way I could support it with the current deadlines that are in there. I think February 28th, 2026 is just too short. And I certainly think they could, I don't know what sprint is in the DOT context, but I sort of like this concept that you have like this sprint person that could help push forward the reporting requirements in this bill. But to pass it as it is with no additional money, no changes to the deadline, I would really struggle with.
Okay. Anyone else like to comment? To me, the most difficult part of the bill, besides the deadline, is the per permit part of the report, right? I mean, one line for one permit, right? I can't see us, reading through hundreds of lines of stuff, whereas, more of a summary kind of thing that said, so many permits were more than 90 days, so many were more than 120 days, so many were more than, like this. That would be more useful, I would think. Right? And why? Yeah.
Yeah, rather than.
Right.
Right.
I think they're trying to get at that, but the way they are asking for the information is, Joe's permit was like this, and Fred's permit was like that, and
What they don't tell you is how many times they didn't have all the information.
All right, Representative.
Yeah, just following on what you said, Chair McGuire, I sit on the Capital Project Overview Committee, and we have quarterly reports of all the capital projects, which is good, but they're done line by line. They're multiple pages, and if you think anybody is sitting there going through every single project, they're not. And I think to go along with what you're saying, to see sort of a summary and maybe a little bit more of an analysis that would help the legislative process would be better than the way this is written. I think it's hard to write legislation. Sometimes these sorts of words are easy to write, but then the doing is far more difficult.
Okay. So, what do we think? Retain? Is that
I'm good with retain.
all right?
Hold on a second.
Is that too much? What do you think?
I'm good
Any
with retain.
you like retain? Representative Griffin.
I think there's a real need for visibility here. Admittedly, the bill isn't perfect, but I would like to see it pass with a date where, a reasonable date where they could begin to make the tools to implement it.
Okay. Representative Munns.
So I guess, I don't know that I necessarily have a real problem with retaining, but I guess I would wonder what's going to happen if we retain it. I mean, are we going to expect to get something or move something forward, or is it just going to be sitting there?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping not to come back on these bills, but that, we could think about an amendment and take a week or something and come back next Tuesday. You want to do that?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So we will, people can individually work on their own amendments, and we will keep this open for another week. How's that? Okay. Let's move. Is that reasonable? Okay, let's move on. So we will now open the hearing. I guess I do that for what's next? Senate Bill 63. This should be a quick one, I would think. I do see Representative Almy, so I'm assuming, are you here for this? Say that again? Are you here for Senate Bill 63? Yeah. Informally. You don't want to say anything? Oh, okay. All right. All right, why don't you come up and tell us a little bit about it? Sure.
I think you know more about it than I do because you all, without the knowledge of Ways and Means, changed the way the formula for the travel and tourism budget was calculated. It took us several weeks of arguing among ourselves before we finally figured that out. So I'd like more cooperation between revenue and budget on when you change things that should have been done in Ways and Means, but on all that this does is that when you did change the formula so that it was set by the amount of money that that Ways and Mean that the revenue for excuse me, I wasn't thinking of talking to this, but on sorry, I'm forgetting names of things a lot these days. The revenue for, yeah, that would be nice to have.
Sometimes that helps.
I was trying to squint at it, but yeah, sorry, the meals and rooms tax revenue. And it is based on how much would be gotten for the travel and tourism budget is based on that, but it is not directly linked to that. You see under the current circumstances, you see how much revenue came in the previous term, I believe it would be, for rooms and meals, and you base the amount of money that you're going to take out of the general fund to put in for travel and tourism. On what that does is you're always a little bit behind if there was a lag in tourism the year before because there was a major melt going on during ski season. Then there would be less money available the next time. I've found the people in travel and tourism to be really, really good at using the money strategically in the best places for the time. If we've got a lot of chaos going on inside the United States, but there's a good tourism market going on in Europe, they will send a lot of the advertising to Europe. If we have to make do pretty much with what's going on in the United States, one of the things that they do is they make sure the people in Massachusetts and Connecticut know that we have snow when they don't during ski season. And that's just two examples of the kinds of things they've been doing. And when we started out tracking this, I believe that we were getting in 8 times as much revenue for the general fund. For the rooms and meals in general, as we spent in travel and tourism for it. I've lately been hearing 20 times. I don't know who came up with that figure, but 8 times is also a very good rate of return for that money. And anything that helps the general fund helps the rest of the state budget. So what this did was that after you made that change, the legislature put in a municipal fund, and the statute, it was inserted in the statute in such a way that the calculation only incurred after the municipal fund money had been taken out, the 30%. So there was a 30% loss to travel and tourism. And all this does is to restore, that's plus the revenue, the income identified under RSA 78A 26.3 for the most recently completed fiscal year. So that 30% comes back as part of the money that from which the travel and tourism budget is calculated, and they get more money to earn us more money. And I don't really believe in that 20 times, but somebody
All right.
said
Any
that.
questions for Representative Mahoney? No? All right. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so this bill basically, the money sent to the municipalities used to be, this section used to apply to all the money, and now we take out money from municipalities, and that therefore no longer applies to travel and tourism. Now, my own personal feeling on this is I strongly dislike this entire section and this concept of automatic spending, because it seems to me if you really believed that money spent on the travel and tourism budget comes back to you as rooms and meals tax, then when rooms and meals tax was low, you would spend more. And when rooms and meals tax was high, you would spend less, right? So, but this is the opposite, right? When times are good, we're spending more, and when times are bad, we're spending less. So therefore, we don't really believe that travel and tourism works in that way. So in any case, this whole section in almost every budget is simply ignored, right? I mean, so in the budget, we always say, notwithstanding RSA 12.0, then whatever, here's what travel and tourism gets, right? So I don't know. So I'm going to,
But this year you abated,
what?
which is why the bill is there.
Yeah, I understand. But I'm going to recognize Representative Sweeney for a motion, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to retain Senate Bill 63.
All right. Is there a second? A second. Okay. So any discussion of this motion? We just think, the budget's already gone. And so anyways, Representative Hacken Phillips.
I'm just interested in the mechanics of the effects of if the change were to go into effect. It seems like it is affecting more than just the general fund and more than just the travel and tourism budget, but indeed, the municipal portion of how much the revenue comes out of the meals and rooms, and as well as the education trust fund, I think they also get a chunk. So it seems like there are multiple moving parts, not just the simplification of thinking this is only the travel and tourism budget and the general fund that are affected. Is that a correct assumption? Representative Almy.
Yes. the small amount of money, which is the car rentals, has always come out, gone to the Education Trust Fund. When it was created, they thought it was going to be 10 million. It was a lot less than that. When it was created, they dedicated that. That was part of the money that we put together to create the first chunk of money for Education Trust Fund. And was listed as 10 million. I think that we got 3 because a number of rental car companies went across the border into Massachusetts.
Yeah, I mean, just as not a follow up, but as a reflection of that comment, I'd just like to say that it is a little alarming that that was not discussed, up to this point. And so I think that's,
But that money,
in a budget cycle that's already out of our hands, I think it's a really important revenue and kind of disbursement picture that I think really needs to be vetted a little more deeply.
Okay. Representative Weiler.
Yeah, I object to this on 2 counts. It's reversing what we said, no more money on advertising for tourism, so we can actually find out if there was an effect. But the other thing is they're hitting meals and rooms tax, which have already been criticized for taking the gain out of the meals and rooms tax and using it elsewhere. We've already heard a lot of complaints about that. This would further that complaints. We're going to be faced with less tourism this next season, especially from Canada, because of all this uproar over 51st state. And it's almost people are, no, we'll never go to the United States again, kind of thing. People deciding, I don't want to go to Canada, they might be hostile to me if I went up there as a tourism. So both ways, supposedly we're already seeing effects in tourism, which would bring the tourism dollars down. And I know we'll have a claim if we don't spend the money on advertising. That's the reason, but it won't be. And some of the things I see, if there's doubts in the rest of the Northeast about, well, I don't know if we'll go to Europe this year. I don't know how they feel about it. All this tariff stuff is, maybe we'll just go to somewhere in the United States. And maybe it'll increase our tourism, which has happened in the past when times are not that great. So I don't know what the results will be, but I don't favor this mechanism.
I understand. Representative Griffin.
I look at this bill as being part of the budget. And at this point, the budget is all up in the air, and I believe that the bill should be retained, if only for that reason.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, when the clerk's ready, we'll call the roll. On the motion to retain.
Okay, the motion is retain on Senate Bill 63. Chairman McGuire.
I'll vote last.
Oh, okay. Vice Chairman Cambrils.
Yes.
Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Weiler.
Yes.
Representative Ebel.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Munns.
No.
And Representative Hacken Phillips.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes to.
I'll vote yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I always hated that when I was a clerk. Oh, okay. So, 2, 4, 5, yeah. The motion to retain passes 8-1.
Good. Now we go on to Senate Bill 241. Do I see? I don't see any senators. Thank you. Okay. So I don't see Senator Avard. I don't see. Maybe Representative Munns would like to introduce the bill.
Sure. My favorite bill. SB 241 is the latest in a series of bills that have been introduced over the last 4 years to, it started as a bill to specifically ask for funding to begin the design and engineering work on a Hampton Beach State Park pier. It was amended by the Senate to remove the funding, which was originally requested at $12 million, to remove the funding and establish the fund as a vehicle that, or as a vehicle that could accept contributions from the public, from and any funds that may become available from the state in the future towards constructing a pier at Hampton Beach. I do have an amendment that I would like to offer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I've said this on many occasions. The Hampton Bay State Park Pier is a mystery to most of my constituents.
Hold on a moment.
Oh, sorry.
Jack, I just sent you all another amendment. Okay, to print. Yeah, thank you.
The Hampton Beach State Park Pier is a mystery to most of my constituents. Most of the residents of Hampton do not know anything about a pier or don't think it's necessary. For the record, I've been opposed to building a pier off Hampton Beach since I returned to the House in 2022. And I've consistently appeared before the Senate and House committees to oppose the two bills that have been introduced since 2022. I had hoped that my perspective as both a state representative and someone who has lived 3 miles north of Ocean Boulevard, where the pier is proposed to be located, for 28 years would be persuasive, but apparently I need to work on my powers of persuasion. We, the legislature, have spent $300,000 on a nice-to-have project that was proposed 4 years ago. We're no closer to completion. It has been characterized as an accessibility improvement that is high cost with moderate public support, that has physical environmental impacts and moderate connection to other facilities. In short, it's a project that is nowhere near ready for prime time. Having said that, the Senate and now the House have spoken. Both bodies clearly want to establish a Hampton Beach State Park Pier Fund. The amendment I'm proposing acknowledges that and respects those decisions. It does not eliminate the Pier Fund and does not change the primary purpose of the fund, which is to obtain engineering services, siting, permitting, final design, construction, and ongoing maintenance of an accessible walking pier. What it does do is encourage what the prime sponsor of these bills has said has been his primary objective since he first introduced it, which is to improve access to the water for individuals with a disability. Since I think we can all agree that the chances of identifying at least $22 million to construct a pier is unlikely in the foreseeable future, I believe we can make some progress towards accomplishing that goal by allowing the Pier Fund to also be able to support other lower cost projects to improve accessibility as identified in the accessibility study published in 2024 that cost us $150,000. This amendment will allow that to happen. And the specific changes in the amendment are on lines 8 and 9, where we add the language to allow projects that improve accessibility to be paid for, and then on lines 12 and 13. We make specific reference to the October 31st, 2024 accessibility study. That's the only change that this amendment includes. If we pass this amendment, it will allow the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to, if they're able to find some money, to invest in those specific projects rather than having to hold on to that money until they get the full 22 million to build the pier. And if they do get 22 million to build a pier, then, you know, I guess go for it. But this just provides a little additional flexibility.
Okay. Now, I see somebody in the audience. Are you here from Department of Natural and Conservation? Why don't you come up and talk to us about this?
Hi, good morning. My name is Colin Capel. I'm the Chief of Staff for Parks and Recreation under DNCR. Just here to listen in, but I'm also here to add some value as well.
Okay.
We're neutral, remain neutral at this point, but this amendment is certainly an interesting addition to.
Yeah,
sorry.
get a little closer.
I'm a low talker. I just came to highlight some of the aspects of the activities based on the study that we're taking right now that are high value, low cost, that aren't specific to the pier itself. I have a quote here actually for multiple extensions for the Moby mats that we have on the beach right now to add accessibility throughout the full scope of the park, not just the pier access, and adding on some wings as well to those so that those with accessibility challenges can kind of step off to the left or the right and retain their accessibility while not impeding traffic on those Moby mats as well. We are working right now to add some more accessibility wayfinding to the kiosks that are available at the beach, and we're also just doing basic improvement to the railings. And on page 51 of the study, can you hear me? Just make sure.
Not great.
Slightly, sorry. Yeah, I'm a softie. And page 51 specifically of the study
We could turn that off.
mentions. Sorry, guys. This is my first time in front of y'all.
We'll try not to be too.
Oh, no. On South Beach, figure 511, the formalized walkway rendering, we have scraped away a lot of that sand now to start to establish more accessibility there. So we're chipping away at a lot of those high value, low cost initiatives while remaining neutral on future plans. But if the amendment were to pass, we would have a little bit more flexibility with funding that was made available to us.
Did you talk to Senator Avard when he developed this bill or not?
Not me personally. I'm not sure about anyone else having the conversations.
So, because what my main question is this bill, what's the purpose of the bill, right? Is it to create a pier that would be more attractive in general to tourism, so therefore we get more visitors to the park and to Hampton Beach, and as a side benefit, it's also better for disabled people, right? Because it's a man-made structure, not sand, right? But, or is the whole purpose of the pier or the main purpose of the pier for accessibility, right? Is it there specifically to help disabled people?
In my reading of the proposal, it's accessibility to many, including fishermen. So it's accessibility to the
Plus
public
fishing.
itself. Yes.
Well, but it would be accessible, yeah.
Yes,
So,
it's
okay.
accessible to many.
So this would not be, so my first job after college, my first full-time job was I was a professor at UC Santa Cruz. And in Santa Cruz, there's a pier, okay? But you drive onto the pier and there's restaurants and stores and stuff like that. And at the end of the pier is a colony of sea lions. So you go out there and the sea lion, during high tide, the sea lion comes up onto the cross pieces of the pier and then rests there, and the tide goes away and they sun themselves, okay? And you go and watch the sea lions. And eventually they get hungry and they drop off into the water, you know? It's fun. So is this what we're talking about here? Or it sounds like not, right? You're talking about a little pier, you just go fishing. There's
Yes,
no
I-
boats,
I-
there's no
I haven't
there's
heard
no
from the sea
restaurants,
lions. I
there's
don't
no-
know if they're waiting for the pier to come out so they can come out and sunbathe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Chris. Representative Munz.
It's definitely not a pier. The intention was that never that it would be a pier that would be large enough that you could drive a car on. That's certainly wasn't in the plans. But I think you're you're pinpointing one of the reasons why I have been so vocal in my opposition to this, because I don't know that it's never been really well defined. I mean, one of the, there's a lot of talk about improving, giving people with a disability access to the water. And, and my response to that has been, well, we can do that by, using the mats and other things. No. We want them to have access over the water. So that changed. Then there's been discussions about, fishermen, giving fishermen an access. Well, they already can fish off the breakwater that we have, and the new bridge that's being built is being specifically designed so that you can have fishermen there. So that doesn't make sense. There's been discussions about, well, creating, putting, restaurants out there, and that, I don't know where that's gone. And then one of the things that jumped out at me when I read the very first study that we spent $150,000 on was there was reference made in the report by the consultant that did the report that, and at some point in the future, cruise ships could dock at the pier, which is like, okay, wait a minute, what? A cruise ship coming to Hampton Beach? I mean, great, come on. So it's just been a very ill-defined project.
So it's not a deep enough water, I
No.
don't think, for,
No.
yeah.
not.
Okay. Representative Evil.
Could, Chris, I'm sorry, Representative Munns, you said that you've generally opposed this. A lot of times you see things like this that are sort of coming from the community, coming from a chamber of commerce, like really a public swell of support for this idea. Could you share with us what the general attitude is about it in your area?
Yeah, I have to be careful because I know my friends at the Hampton Chamber of Commerce are probably listening to me now. I would say that I don't know that that the idea was generated locally. All of the bills that have been sponsored by people not from Hampton. I think once the idea was proposed, I think the business community at Hampton Beach, the Hampton Chamber of Commerce, I think saw it as, potentially a good idea or an idea that might help the community, the businesses down there. I can tell you though, from talking to people, just, regular folks in the community, when you talk to them about a pier, they all roll their eyes. Particularly when you start talking about the locations that are being proposed, which all have, issues. I mean, the one location at the north end of the beach is right at a bend in Route 1A, which would cause tremendous traffic problems, and there's parking issues. The location at the south side, the south end of the beach, creates all sorts of environmental issues with dunes and plovers, nesting plovers, and then the suggestion that, well, we'll just put it off the seashell in the middle of the beach. Won't that look nice? I don't think that flies because that's prime beach real estate. Nobody's going to want to have a pier there. So, and then the other issue that comes up anytime you talk about anything at Hampton Beach to people in the community is, okay, great. Who's going to maintain it? Who's going to be responsible for, policing it? Because those costs inevitably end up on the backs of the local property taxpayers, because we don't get reimbursed enough by the state to take care of, what's going on. I mean, we're a town of 16,000 people, 8-9 months of the year, and for 4 months of the year, we're a town of 150,000. So it creates lots of problems. So I would say that I think I would characterize the response, the overall response is, well, that's a kind of a nice to have, but is it something we really need? No.
So what do you say to this comment that there's similar fishing available elsewhere? Is that true?
I can't speak to the specific quality level
bridge?
of fishing, but you know, there's certainly plenty of fishing available. I grew up in New Hampshire and had no problem getting a striper.
Okay. All right. Representative Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm filling in for the clerk today. Could you spell your name for
Oh,
me?
yes. It's Colin, first name, and last name is Capelle.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Representative Evil.
Have you ever included this project in your capital budget requests?
Not that I'm aware.
So it's really something coming from the legislature
Yes.
as opposed to the parks?
Correct.
Representative Weiler.
Hampton Beach, as you know, is already overcrowded, already overused. When the weather is good, there's been a few times we'd say, oh, let's go to Hampton Beach. And we'd start driving there and we're 10, 15 miles away. We get 5 miles away and it's stop and go traffic to get there. And you know, when you get there, there'll be no place to park. So you turn around and go home and say, no, this isn't the day for Hampton Beach, especially when the weather is good. And some of the things I see, like there's a woman sent us this thing, Mike Cahill sent us all a piece. And a woman is talking about wave chairs for the handicapped and getting them out into the water and those things. By the same token, if somebody handicapped really wants to get out in the water, get a boat. Put them in a boat. It's a heck of a lot cheaper than spending millions of dollars building a pier that I would hate to see destroyed by a winter storm within the first 10 years, which from what we've seen in Hampton Beach in the winter storms, it moves a lot of stuff. I remember picking up seaweed one year when I was using it as fertilizer, and it was way over the seawall and across the street. But
The accessibility study that was done that he referenced, I mean, it's a good comprehensive study. I mean, it identifies a lot of, you know, good things that can be done. And, you know, I can't think, and you may know better, but I can't think of any in there that are really large capital expenditures. A lot of them are, you know, kind of low cost, low hanging fruit that, you know, can make a real difference to people that are trying to get access.
Well, so, I mean, to some extent, we got to think about that we're the finance committee and not the resources committee, right? And so there's $1 here, right? There's no money in this. So we could simply just pass it or as is. I created an amendment also, if you want to look at it, Jack can hand it out, which kind of goes in a different direction than Representative Munn's amendment. Yes, Representative Beal.
Oh, just a point of
I'm
order.
sorry, Representative.
That's all right. Point of order. So did Representative Munns make a motion to accept that amendment?
No, we were just talking.
Oh,
I
okay.
think, yeah. So, so this is, in some sense, goes in a different direction than Representative Munn's amendment. So, what I added was the word parking. So, on line 8, and associated parking. Okay, because I spoke to former Representative Emmerich, who's from this area, and he said, if you're going to build something like this, you're going to need more parking, because you know, to get more people in, et cetera. And so, so I added the word parking so that you could build more parking. And then the other thing I did was I removed the last sentence, which is the one that says, after 10 years, we're going to repurpose this money. And I just did that because as somebody who might donate to a project, I don't like the idea that I donate for X and it ends up being Y, right? And so if you're going to donate for this pier, it's going to be a pier. So that I took out the thing where the donation goes away after 10 years. So that's another way of thinking about this. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not wedded to this, and, you know, apparently the House likes it. The one thing I'll say about Representative Munn's amendment was he was a co-sponsor of the floor amendment, which failed, and it's not all that different, right? So,
Well, it keeps the name of the fund as the pier fund and retains the primary purpose of the fund as being building a pier.
I see.
Whereas the amendment changed the name of the fund and changed the purpose.
I see. Okay. Representative Griffin.
Well, having been at Hampton Beach a few times in my life, I think I can join the chorus here and testify that there isn't enough parking. And, yeah, I think if we're gonna build a pier, we have to provide for associated parking. And if it's gonna be a handicap pier, that means the parking's gonna be limited. And not quite as flexible as regular parking, so. And your point on giving to a charitable fund or some kind of a fund for a specific purpose, and finding out that they don't get enough money to do the purpose, they're gonna grab the money for something else. That seems to defeat the purpose of setting up a fund and expecting donations, because I, for one, would like to, if I'm gonna donate to something, I would like to, understand that that's what the money would be used for.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Representative Munn.
I mean, I certainly would be willing to take my amendment, back and re-amend it and include in the language that talks about, the work towards a pier, including parking in there. And, if it's the consensus of the group that, we should remove the language about money being transferred after a certain period of time, I'm willing to take that out as well.
Okay, Representative Evil.
Well, another idea is that the money could also be used not for state parks, for all state parks, but to improve disabled access at Hampton Beach. Right? Well, because not just peer related, but in general. Because my understanding is, I mean, if I remember all the original discussions, a lot of it really did focus on accessibility. So you could do the parking, you could remove the sentence that you object to, Mr. Chair, but you could also say that part of the fund could be used to improve disabled access. Because can I be real about this? Are we really going to come up with $12 to $20 million right off the bat to build a pier? But could we do smaller improvements to improve disabled access in the meantime? I think we probably could, and that's another thing that people could donate to.
All right, Representative Rung and then Representative Sweeney. Yeah.
Is there anything that prevents Parks and Rec from accepting donations now to improve accessibility in our state parks?
We already accept donations for various needs across the state park system.
So my position is, I'm not in favor of the pier. I don't want to set up anything that's going to support the development of a pier. I just don't think that there's any appropriate spot there. I mean, Representative Munns went through some of the details. It's a huge, it's really expensive, and I'm very, very concerned about maintenance. When you look at all the money that had to be spent on storm repair and that didn't even involve a pier. That was just the seawall. So I'm against the pier thing, but I am in favor of improving accessibility. But if we don't need a bill to be able to do that, to accept donations and to do that, I don't see the purpose of even going through this legislation. So I'd actually be in favor of ITL.
Representative Sweeney.
So I want to offer a motion to accept your amendment, Mr. Chair, 2131H.
I'll second it.
Okay. So what about Representative Rung's point? We don't seem to be overwhelmed with people who want to peer. You know what I mean? It's like, I guess both bodies have passed it.
Yeah, I
so
would say
therefore-
both bodies have passed, and I think your amendment gives the ability that if there is, it's gonna take a lot of money to do. The state is not going to produce the money to do this. We didn't put it in the budget. I would never vote to spend state dollars or taxpayer dollars on constructing a pier. It seems to me, especially with removing the time limit that your amendment does on it, private developers, organizations that want to come and work together to construct and fund this pier would be empowered to do so. They can organize themselves to do such an endeavor, bring, mention of restaurants or small businesses on the pier that can help fund the expansion of it. That's all for the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to work out with Hampton Beach and with stakeholders there. I think this is just enabling that sort of activity to take place without putting it on the taxpayers to fund. And that's how I could support it with your amendment.
Okay. All right, Representative Munch.
I guess I'd push back a little bit on that. I mean, if we all generally, if we recognize and there's no support for building a pier, why wouldn't we at least then give ourselves the ability to do, if there is money that becomes available, to put it to use for things that are going to make a difference to people that visit the beach, which is what my amendment does.
I'll respond to that. If there's money available to improve accessibility, the chief of staff just stated that people can already donate to DNCR to improve accessibility, and those funds can go to that purpose as well. So I don't see it conflicting as we're only accepting any dollars for a pier. But if there are people, if there are businesses, organizations, developers that wake up one morning and they say, we want to move forward with this project that the state's laid down the framework for, they're free to do so. And I understand today there's not crowds of support or people in support of it, but clearly this legislation came from somewhere, went through one body, and we're just kind of the final check on it to approve that dollar appropriation to set up this fund. So I'm fine with amending it with Representative McGuire's amendment and moving the ball on it.
Okay, Representative Evil.
When I have a question for you, is it Capel?
Yes,
Mr.
it is.
Capel?
Yes, it is.
When people donate for accessible access, can they identify it to be used at a specific place, or do you just have a fund where people can? What is the option? Let's just back up. I would like to see something in here that would enable some of these funds specifically to be used at Hampton Beach, because I think that's what a lot of people are interested in, and because that's what I think Senator Avard was particularly concerned about. Do they have a capability now to contribute to something at state parks where they can identify it to be used at Hampton Beach?
I would have to revisit our RSA that references donations to state park funds to specifically answer, but in general, donors can articulate what their intentions are, and we can do our best to ensure that occurs. At this time, the State Park Advisory Council helps us to make those types of decisions, but I don't have the specifics on me, which I can get to though.
I guess I don't see the harm in putting something in here that the fund could also be used to improve accessible access. I understand what he's saying, but it's a very protracted process. My 2 cents.
Representative Cambrell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I'm against the pier. I agree with everything that's been stated. However, I also agree with Representative Sweeney that at this point, our function here is just to approve. This is to make sure that the taxpayer is not on the hook for anything. We're just approving the ability to set up a $1 fund so that they can take donations. So I'd like to vote on your amendment and move forward.
All right, Representative Rung.
Well, I'm going to vote against it just because I think this is coming too soon. In the amendment, it mentions even covering maintenance costs. And I think if this amendment were to come in a year or two, when there was more visible support and understanding about what those costs would be, but I think we're setting the expectation with passing this amendment that we do support a pier. We support it so much, we're setting up a fund. Now, we only have money to put $1 in it now, but I think it's sending a message that is not what I'm hearing from my fellow committee members.
Yeah, the maintenance and all that stuff, all of the language here, except for and associated parking, is in the bill already, right? It's not, anyway. All right, I guess why don't we vote, and we have a motion on this amendment. Shall we vote on that? Yeah.
Okay.
Representative Evil.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this here on line 8. It does say maintenance of an accessible walking pier and other projects and actions.
You're reading Representative Munn's
Munn
amendment.
says, oh, did you add this line? Okay.
He added the word walking,
Okay.
and he added this and other
Other
projects,
projects, okay,
stuff,
sorry.
yes, yeah.
Scratch that. So I guess basically, you're opposed to adding language that would refer specifically to use for disability reasons?
Well, there is already, again, the question is, to me, the one I started with, which is, are we building a pier because it's fun to have a pier, right? And it attracts more people in general, and it has a side benefit of being more accessible to disabled people, right? Or are we just trying, is our main purpose to get more disabled people to Hampton Beach and make it more usable for them, right? And I tend to think the pier idea would get more donations, right? I mean, because it's more for everybody and not specifically for disabled people, but yeah.
I mean, in response to that, as I said, I mean, the testimony that was made, every time I've sat through the testimony was that we're doing this to improve accessibility for people with disabilities. The fact that the legislature obviously agreed with that, because in the last biennium, we added $150,000 to complete an accessibility study. And I guess one of the things that concerns me about the way your amendment is worded, it makes no reference to that accessibility study. If it only makes reference to the study that was done on October 28th of 2022, which was specifically about building a pier. And so if you didn't know the history of it, the fact that that there's no reference to the accessibility study, that would suggest that, nothing needs to be done about accessibility. But the legislature paid $150,000 for a study to look at that, to be integrated into the plans.
Yeah. So presumably Senator Avard or whoever decided to, not reference that study, right? And in some sense, the House did too, because, your amendment with Representative Darby was turned down, so. Anyway, all right, Representative Hacken-Phillips?
Well, along the same line of thought then, Mr. Chair, the legislature has not previously approved this fund for the purposes of parking. So I just think if we're going to try to stay with the legislative intent that's already passed the chambers, that we're already stepping into a policy decision outside of that. So I think everything has to be taken in context, right? We know the history of the many-year process of evaluating whether or not this pier is reasonable for this space, through the feasibility, but also feasibility study, but also then there was a follow-up study to determine how to make it more, accessible to everybody's use. So, the context is clear. There is a legislative history leading up to this point. It's not included in this language of the bill proposed through the Senate because they only reference the feasibility study for the recommendations and findings, you know, to build the pier, which is the purpose of the fund. So I guess, you know, we're splitting hairs here. I think the reality is that we all acknowledge that this is a large project that has a lot of implications for the locality. And, you know, our job is to look at the monetary policy, you know, behind this suggestion, this policy suggestion. Here, it's suggesting $1 funding, an appropriation. With the amendment, we're going to switch the purpose of that fund, either amendment, you know, the purposes for which those monies could be used. So I just think for us to put our blinders on and say that we're willing to accept one piece of the policy change but not the rest, it feels a little disingenuous, given that we all acknowledge there's been a long road leading up to this point. So, you know, it feels like the, you know, division should take each other's opinions into account and to reflect the entirety of the history. That would be my recommendation.
All right, let me ask for a very quick caucus, and then we'll go in the other room there. I want to talk about this. I understand the Representative Sweeney would like to make,
I would
undo his
like,
motion.
I would like to withdraw my motion on 2131H.
Okay, and the second?
I would withdraw my second on that.
All right, so Representative Sweeney wants to make a different motion. I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After considerations, I would move inexpedient to legislate on Senate Bill 241.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, unless, how about the Representative Rung might want a second? Okay. Is that all right?
Whatever, yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll let Representative Rung second. All right, so the motion is inexpedient to legislate. Too many problems, I guess. Any further discussion? Nope. Clerk can call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cambrils,
Yes.
Representative Griffin,
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Weiler. Representative Ebel.
Yes.
Representative Munns.
Yes.
Representative Hacken Phillips.
Yes.
And the clerk votes yes. And Chairman McGuire.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 9-0.
Okay, we'll be done for today, but we're going to have to come back on, what was it, House Bill 74. Yeah. And yeah, I'm assuming next Tuesday at 10, but I'll have to check with Janet. Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay, good. And thank you all.